Well, hello, my algebros. Let's go through this chapter 2 study guide. On number 1, first we need to pick the right solution. We always read from the variable's perspective here. So I'd like to rewrite it from the variable's perspective, so it makes it really easy to see that n is less than all the numbers that are less than -2. On number 2, we have to write an inequality. The essay must be at least 350 words. What does that mean? That means, can it be 350? Yes, it can. Can it be more than that? Yes, it could. And that's why B is the correct answer. If it said at most, then we know we couldn't go above 350, right? So it would have to be less than. All right, number 3 says we have to solve and graph. So we're going to use our inverse operations, and we go ahead and graph using an open circle because it is not equal to. On number 4, we have to use our inverse operations. Getting x is greater than -6, so we put a number -6. Numbers that are bigger would be -5, numbers smaller, -7. Again, it's an open circle. Number 5, we are multiplying by a negative coefficient, so we flip the sign, getting w is greater than or equal to 3, which is why we also shade it in. On number 6, I use my inverse operations. Again, a negative coefficient, so I flip the sign and I graph accordingly. On number 7, I have to distribute first. Let me back that up a little bit for you. I distribute, and I also resolve that 6 to the second power is 36, because 6 times 6 is 36. Then I need to solve, so I subtract the 8 from both sides, getting 2x is less than or equal to 28, and I divide. Once I divide, I can go ahead and graph. It's equal to, so I have to shade it in. Number 8, I need to get all the variables on the left side, which is why I move the 3x, and all the whole numbers on the right side, and then I can solve, getting x is less than -2. This does not ask me to graph, so I don't. On number 9, I go ahead and distribute first, and then I get all the variables on the left side, all the whole numbers on the right, and I solve. Number 10, I distribute first, then I get all of the variables on the left side, and they eliminate each other. I end up with -10 is greater than -12, which is true. So I know it's infinite many solutions. If I kept going and added 10 to both sides, I get 0 is greater than -2, which is still true. And it's infinite many solutions is the answer. Number 11, I need to combine my like terms first. 12 and -7y make 5y plus 12. And then I subtract the 5y from both sides, and I get 12 is bigger than or equal to 20, and that is not true, so it is no solution. Not true. Not true. Number 12, the average of Paula's 2 test scores must be 90 or more for her to have an A in the class. She got a 93 on the first test, so what is the lowest grade she can get to keep her A? So I have 2 tests. We know what the first test is. Sorry, a little too fast there. We know what the first test is, and we also know that this has to be equal to or greater than 90 to keep her A. The first test is 93, and we know we're dividing by 2. In order to isolate this variable, we have to first multiply both sides by 2, so it's no longer a fraction. And now we simply just subtract 93. And we get that she must earn at least an 87 or higher to keep her A. 13, we have Jasmine and her sister are saving to buy MP3 players this time. When will Jasmine have more than her sister? Well, what does Jasmine have? Jasmine has $40 and she is saving $10 per week, while her sister has $60 and is saving $6 per week. Now again, I want to get all the variables on the left, so I subtract the 6W. And I want to get all the whole numbers on the right, so I subtract 40 from both sides. And I end up with 4W equals 20. I divide off, and I see the weeks have to be bigger. The weeks must be bigger than 5. What number is bigger than 5? Well, 6. 6 weeks is when Jasmine will finally have more than her sister. 14 says that we have to translate this, the difference of. So the difference, that is what makes it become subtraction, of 5 and 4 times a number is greater than, is bigger than, or equal to -7. Once you have written the inequality, you can solve for this, subtracting 5 from both sides and dividing by -4, which means you have to flip the sign, and you get x is less than or equal to 3. On 15, we give 2 numbers that are solutions and 2 the numbers that are not solutions. But first, we have to solve for it. So we subtract 5 from both sides, and we divide by 3, and we get x is greater than 6. So numbers that would be solutions are anything greater than 6. So solutions could be 7 or 8 and so forth, right? Because they're bigger than 6. Not solutions are anything that are 6 and below. So it could be 6 or 5 or 4 or so forth. 16, we need to write an inequality for this. The circle represents x, right? And then we can say what the circle means. The circle cannot be 4, but it can be less than 4. 17, this is an and situation because they're not written as 2 separate inequalities. So we need to subtract 9 from all the sides and then divide by 5 to isolate that variable. Remember, we're isolating the A. And we read and write from the variable's perspective. We know one of the answers is -1, so we put that, and one of the answers is 4. But it says A is greater than or equal to 4. -1. So we know we can do in a filled-in circle, and then it can be less than 4. But it's an empty circle because it's not equal to. On 18, this is an or situation, so we know we solve it as 2 separate inequalities. I solve the first and I get h is less than -4. And then I solve the second, subtracting 5 and dividing by 3. And I get h is greater than or equal to 4. So it's a closed circle and it's greater than, which makes sense. Oops. So on number 19, we just need to graph the inequality according to what it says. It's an or, so we write the 2 separate inequalities. It's a closed circle on the greater than. That's why there's an equal to. On 20, this is an and situation. When I know it's an and replaces it with x. So it's x is in the middle, and they're going to be both less than. It's less than or equal to, it's greater than or equal to 0. That's why it's filled in circle. And then it's also less than 20, because we read and write from the variable's perspective. We talked about that the very first lesson. All right, 21. An iguana needs to live in a warm environment. Temperatures in the cage can range between 70 and 90 degrees. This tells us it's going to be an and situation. So we have 70 and 95. X replaces the and then we know it's less than for both of these. We know it could be equal to 70 and it could be equal to 95. So now we have a range between 70 and 95. On 22, the absolute value is isolated, so we go ahead and make our two inequalities. We also know that it's a great or, so it should be an or situation. So we write our two inequalities and we solve for these, and then we go ahead and graph. We see that they are indeed great or, so we know we probably did it right. On 23, I need to isolate the absolute value first after noting that it is a less than situation. So I subtract 3 from both sides. Now I can write my two inequalities, solve, and graph. And we see that this indeed is an and situation because it's between -7 and 17. 24. To isolate our absolute value, we first need to add the 7 to both sides. Then we divide by 3. Finally, we can write our two inequalities because they're finally isolated. So a positive version, when I make the positive version, of course, I have to flip the sign. And I solve for both. It started off as a greater situation, and we can see it stayed as a greater. Lastly, our explaining question on this one is, why is SADMEP important to solve for absolute value? Well, SADMEP is important because SADMEP is part of the parentheses of this. So we know we have to first isolate everything else before we can do it. So there's an order to everything. The orders of operations to solve is SADMEP, and that means we have to add or subtract, multiply or divide before we can finally get to the parentheses, before we can split it into two separate equations and solve. All right, guys, I'll see you tomorrow in class. I know you can do great. Talk to you later. Bye. Don't forget to come to office hours at lunch since there is no warrior time due to PSAT training.